Hello everyone. Today we're going to look at solving quadratics by factoring. We're always going to start with ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So we need to make sure that we always put equals 0 on one side of our equation. A quadratic equation in general may have 0, 1, or 2 solutions. If it's factorable, and in this section it will be, it will have either 1 or 2 solutions. It won't have 0, it won't have 3, it won't have 4, 1 or 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to use factoring, and again, I'm not going to go through step by step how to factor these because we did that in another section. So throughout the problem, I want you to pause the video, do out the factoring, and make sure you get the same thing that I'm getting. So we're going to use factoring, and we're going to use what's called the zero product rule. And that states that if two numbers or two things are multiplied to get 0, then one or both of them have to be 0. I can't take two non-zero numbers, multiply them, and magically get 0. So let's do an example. X squared minus x minus 12 equals 0. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to factor x squared minus x minus 12. It's a fairly nice one. Remember, you want two numbers that multiply to negative 12 and add to negative 1, and those are negative 4 and 3. So now I have two things, two factors, two things that are being multiplied that equal 0. So either x minus 4 is 0 or x plus 3 is 0. One of those has to be 0 in order to multiply to 0. So I just take each one individually and solve the equation. If x minus 4 is 0, then x is 4. And if x plus 3 is 0, then x is negative 3. And there are my two solutions. I can always go back and plug them in and double check it. Right? If I plugged 4 in, I'd have 16 minus 4 minus 12, and that does equal 0. If I plugged in negative 3, I would have 9 plus 3 minus 12, which does equal 0. That's a 12 right there. Okay, so you can always go back and double check. So let's try another one. X squared plus 4 equals 4x. So this does not have 0 on one side, so the first thing we have to do is move that 4x over. And it goes in the middle, so that's where I'll put it. So that should be a squared. X squared minus 4x plus 4 equals 0. Again, it's a fairly nice factorization. The leading coefficient is a 1. And this actually turns into x minus 2 times x minus 2. So I get x minus 2 squared. And I can write it as a square. I can also keep it as the two separate ones, but putting it as a square is actually a little nicer. So I write it as x minus 2 squared. So if something squared is 0, that something has to be 0. Right, so if I square root both sides, I get x minus 2 equals 0. And if x minus 2 is 0, then x must be 2. And here's a case where I get only one solution, because when I factored it, it factored into a binomial squared. So let's try another one. 3x squared minus 12x equals 0. So this isn't a trinomial, it's a binomial. There are only two. So remember, for a binomial, you look first for a GCF and then for a difference of two squares. So there's a really nice GCF here. So we have 3x times x minus 4 equals 0. Okay, so again, I have two things being multiplied. One of them has to be 0. So either 3x is 0 or x minus 4 is 0. If 3x is 0, then x must be 0. And if x minus 4 is 0, x must be 4. So again, here we have two different solutions. For another one, we have x squared plus 30 equals 11x. Again, we don't have 0 on one side, so that's the first thing we have to do. I'll subtract 11x over. Okay. And then we'll factor. Again, two numbers that multiply to 30 add to negative 11. That's negative 6, negative 5. Set each one equal to 0, and then solve. So x is 6 or x is 5. And again, we can double check it. If I plug in the 6, is 36 plus 30 equal to 6 times 11, 66? Yes. Plugging in the 5, is 25 plus 30 equal to 11 times 5, which is 55? Yes. Okay, so it only takes, 5 seconds to double check these, and you really should check your answers. So here's another one. 6z squared equals 6 plus 5z. Again, we don't have 0 on one side, so I'm going to put everything on one side. I can either subtract the 6z squared, that would be faster, or a lot of people like it when their leading coefficient is positive, so I can subtract the 6 and subtract the 5z. So I'm going to do it that way just for convention's sake. So be careful in the factorization here. The leading coefficient is not 1, so you're going to have to use the AC or the grouping method. But hopefully you get 2z minus 3 times 3z plus 2. And then if I set them both equal to 0, I kind of skipped a step here. So 2z minus 3 equals 0. Z would be 3 over 2, right? Add the 3, divide by the 2. Or 3z plus 2 equals 0. Z equals, subtract the 2, divide by 3. So you get 3 over 2 or negative 2 over 3. And then the last one, F is 15L equals 20L squared. Move everything over to one side, doesn't matter which side. Again, we have a binomial, so we want to look for the GCF, which is 5L. So we have 5L times 3 minus 4L equals 0. And again, I kind of skipped a step here. So either 5L equals 0, in which case L equals 0, or 3 minus 4L equals 0, in which case add the 4L over and then divide by the 4. We'll give you L equals 3/4. Okay, but again, don't forget, you can always double check it. L equals 0, clearly that works. 0 equals 0. If L is 3/4, you have to do a little bit more work. You have, you have fractions in there, but it's still not too bad. So you should always check your answer. Okay, so make sure you read through the section, try out the homework, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.